Climate change could destabilize economies and threaten global security as well as human welfare. Unmitigated climate change is expected to increase global warming relative to pre-industrial levels, raising the average temperature on Earth's surface to levels not seen in millions of years. The good news is that climate action is finally gaining momentum. Since the 2015 Paris Agreement, countries have intensified climate action and many have committed to reach net zero emissions by 2050. Until recently, this would have been considered almost impossible because of our heavy reliance on fossil fuels. This bold goal will require unprecedented transformations of world economies, but it doesn't have to be at the cost of reducing our standards of living. My name is Gregor Schwerhoff, and today I'll talk about what it will take for us to reach net zero emissions by 2050. Ambitious action is necessary to achieve the temperature goals set out in the 2015 Paris Agreement, in which countries agreed to hold the increase in global average temperature to well below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. Keeping the temperature increase below 2 degrees Celsius, in turn, will require bringing net greenhouse gas emissions to zero by mid-century. This will require all countries to act, not just some. And it will require much more ambitious policies than have ever been implemented. The current recovery from the COVID-19 crisis presents a unique opportunity to reset economies on a more sustainable path. Many countries are considering mobilizing large investments in infrastructure to help economies recover. And the type of investments made will influence economies' carbon trajectories for decades. Climate policy also has important benefits through improved health and productivity. By discouraging the burning of fossil fuels, it reduces local air pollution, which caused 10 million deaths globally in 2012. Reducing local air pollution increases human welfare, but also labor productivity and labor supply. A comprehensive policy package is needed. Governments have a crucial role to play in bringing about a transition from a high to a low carbon path, including by investing in green infrastructure, providing R&D incentives and carbon price signals, and ensuring a just transition. The importance of green infrastructure is that it works as a complement to and incentivizes sustainable private investments. Such a comprehensive package would have the double benefit of supporting output and employment in the recovery from the COVID-19 crisis and starting the transition to a more sustainable economy. A green investment push alone is unlikely to reduce emissions to net zero. However, carbon pricing is critical to mitigation because it acts as a fee on pollution so that firms and consumers automatically take the harm of carbon emissions to society into account when choosing between production inputs or goods. Carbon pricing can be implemented in the form of a carbon tax or an emission trading system. It incentivizes both a reallocation of resources from high to low carbon activities and energy efficiency gains, an important margin of emission reductions. The revenue from carbon pricing can be used to compensate households and workers affected by carbon prices, for instance, by transfer or a reduction in other tax burdens. Green investment and carbon pricing can be implemented by an active support of the development and industrial-scale deployment of new low-carbon technologies to achieve a full transition to net zero emissions, since in some sectors, low-carbon technology is not yet competitive. Green infrastructure can take various forms. In the transportation sector, the government can accelerate a transition to low-carbon options by providing the supporting infrastructure. An example is charging stations for electric vehicles, which support drivers' access to low-carbon transportation. Similarly, in the energy sector, more interconnected and reliable electricity networks would help increase the amount of renewable energy that can be integrated into the grid, catalyzing private investment in wind and solar electricity generation. So these are some of the things we need to do, but we need to do them fast. In an illustrative delayed action scenario, as shown here by the green line, the switch to green investments is implemented in 2021, but the start of carbon pricing is delayed to 2030. This delay implies that emissions are merely stabilized at today's level and are far from reaching net zero emissions by mid-century. We also need global participation. Some of today's major carbon emitters, such as China, the European Union, Japan, Korea and the United States, have made pledges to reach net zero emissions by mid-century. Stabilizing the global climate, however, will require global emissions to go to net zero. All countries need to reduce emissions. The effects of limiting participation to major emitters can be seen in the purple line. In the absence of climate policy, today's smaller emitters will become major emitters as their populations grow and per capita incomes are expected to increase rapidly. And cooperation is important. Low-income countries have fast-growing energy demand and, in many cases, lack the means to finance the necessary investments. It is important that advanced economies live up to previous commitments to support a climate-friendly transformation in low-income countries. A shift towards low-carbon energy requires large investments in the next 20 years. But we estimate that after the initial cost for setting up the new infrastructure, expenses will fall because much less fuel needs to be purchased. Further, the investment need is hump-shaped, with an increase in the next 20 years and a decrease to recent historical levels after that. The net increase in public investment needed to support the low-carbon transition over the next decade is estimated to be around 0.2% of global GDP annually, and the increase in private investment about twice as much. Stabilizing the global temperature by mid-century requires both immediate and global climate action, supported by financial and technology support for developing economies. Joint action in the form of a green investment push and an international carbon price floor agreement among the G20 would be a valuable first step in putting the global economy on a path to net zero emissions.